In the following video, we explore 5 of the most disturbing unsolved mysteries to plague the 20th century, baffling us decades later. From the haunting disappearance of 5 siblings, to a series of letters that wreaked havoc on a small Ohio community, to the greatest art heist in history. The final case is the worst of all, and you have probably never heard of it. So let's jump in. March 10, 1928. 9-year-old Walter Collins vanished from his Los Angeles neighborhood. He had left home with a small amount of money, intending to see a movie, but never returned. His mother, Christine Collins, was frantic and reported him missing, sparking an intensive search by the LAPD. Walter's disappearance captured national attention, with newspapers publishing his photo and police following every lead. Witnesses claimed to have seen the boy in various locations, but none of the tips panned out. As months passed, hope began to dwindle. In August 1928, 5 months after Walter's disappearance, a boy claiming to be Walter Collins was found in DeKalb, Illinois. Christine Collins was overjoyed and paid for the boy to be brought back to Los Angeles. But when the two were reunited, Christine immediately noticed something was wrong. While the boy did look an awful lot like Walter, Christine claimed that the boy was shorter than her son. When she voiced her doubts to the police, they dismissed her concerns, claiming she was in shock and too emotional to recognize her son. Desperate to avoid public embarrassment, the LAPD pressured Christine to take the boy home and try him out. They hoped the reunion would quash criticism of their handling of Walter's case. Christine's doubts only grew. Christine knew she needed proof. She gathered dental records, doctor's notes, and even had a handwriting expert analyze the old and new Walter's notes. The evidence was undeniable, and finally, under mounting pressure, the boy confessed. He was not Walter Collins. His real name was Arthur Hutchins, a 12-year-old runaway from Iowa who had posed as Walter to get a free trip to California. The LAPD, humiliated, retaliated against Christine. Captain J.J. Jones had her committed to a psychiatric hospital, claiming she was delusional. Christine was only released after the impostor's confession became public. Walter's disappearance took another dark turn when investigators uncovered a shocking link to a notorious crime: the Wineville chicken coop murders. Gordon Stewart Northcott, a farmer in Riverside County, was arrested for abducting, molesting, and murdering young boys. During the investigation, Northcott's mother, Sarah Louise Northcott, confessed to killing Walter Collins. She claimed she had lured the boy to the chicken farm where he was murdered and buried. However, inconsistencies in her confession left room for doubt. Despite her claim, no remains of Walter Collins were ever found. Northcott was convicted of multiple murders and executed in 1930, but the exact fate of Walter remained a mystery. Christine Collins never gave up on finding out what happened to her son. She spent years demanding justice and answers from the police, filing lawsuits against the LAPD for their cruel treatment and negligence. Although she won a judgment against Captain Jones, he never paid her the damages. Christine continued searching for Walter for the rest of her life, holding on to hope that he might still be alive. The disappearance of Walter Collins remains unsolved. Was he another victim of the Wineville chicken coop murders, or did he meet a different fate? The case is a tragic reminder of the lengths a mother will go to for her child, and the devastating consequences of corruption and incompetence in law enforcement. The story inspired Clint Eastwood's 2008 film, The Changeling, which Angelina Jolie was nominated for an Oscar for her portrayal of Christine Collins. In 1976, residents of Circleville, Ohio began receiving anonymous letters filled with threatening and deeply personal information. One of the first recipients was Mary Gillespie, a local school bus driver. The letters accused her of having an affair with Gordon Massey, the school superintendent. The anonymous writer demanded she stop immediately, warning that her secrets would be exposed. Mary denied the affair, but the letters didn't stop. Instead, they escalated, and her husband, Ron Gillespie, also started receiving letters. The messages were laced with anger and warnings, urging Ron to intervene in his wife's alleged indiscretions. The mystery took a darker turn on August 19, 1977. Ron received a phone call believed to be from the letter writer. Enraged, he grabbed his gun and left the house, but he never returned alive. His truck was found crashed into a tree, and Ron was dead. Oddly, his gun had been fired once, though no bullet or explanation for the shot was ever found. Authorities ruled his death an accident, citing alcohol in his system. However, many, including members of Ron's family, believed foul play was involved and tied it to the anonymous letter writer. The letters continued to pour into homes around Circleville, with more people targeted and secrets exposed. Mary Gillespie remained a primary victim, enduring years of harassment. In 1983, things escalated further when Mary found a threatening sign about her daughter posted along her bus route. When she stopped to remove it, she discovered it was rigged with a booby trap, a loaded pistol set to fire. Fortunately, it didn't go off. Police traced the gun to Paul Freshour, Mary's brother-in-law. Paul denied involvement, but he became the prime suspect. In 1983, he was convicted of attempting to kill Mary, largely based on circumstantial evidence, including handwriting analysis linking him to some of the letters. He was sentenced to 7 to 25 years in prison. Even with Paul Freshour behind bars, the letters didn't stop. In fact, they continued, targeting not just Mary but also law enforcement and other residents. Some letters were even postmarked while Paul was in solitary confinement, making it nearly impossible for him to have sent them. This raised doubts about whether Paul was truly the Circleville letter writer. Paul maintained his innocence until his death in 2012, claiming he had been framed. He even cooperated with investigators and media to prove his case, but the true identity of the writer remained elusive. To this day, the Circleville letters remain an unsolved mystery. Who wrote the letters? Was Paul Freshour truly the mastermind, or was he a scapegoat in a much larger conspiracy? It's the early hours of March 18, 1990 in Boston, Massachusetts. While the city sleeps, two men dressed as police officers approach the Isabella Gardner Museum. They tell the night security guards they're responding to a disturbance call. The guards, young and inexperienced, buzz them in. It's a decision that will become one of the costliest mistakes in art history. Once inside, the officers reveal their true intentions. They handcuff the guards, take them to the basement and tie them up. The museum is now theirs to plunder. For the next 81 minutes, the thieves roam the galleries, selecting their targets with care, or perhaps chaos. They steal 13 pieces of art, including works by some of the most celebrated artists in history: Vermeer, Rembrandt, Degas, and Manet. Among the stolen items are Rembrandt's Christ in the Storm on the Sea of Galilee, his only known seascape, depicting Jesus calming the sea as described in Mark chapter 4, and Vermeer's The Concert, one of fewer than 40 paintings by the Dutch master, estimated to be worth $250 million, making it the most expensive missing artwork in the world. The lost artwork also includes the following: Rembrandt's portrait of the artist as a young man, as well as his painting titled A Lady and Gentleman in Black, Govert Flink's landscape with obelisk, Manet's Chez Tortoni, The Three Mounted Jockeys Leaving the Paddock, and Procession on a Road Near Florence, all by Edgar Degas. The combined value of these pieces, over $500 million, making this the largest art theft in history. The thieves' methods were brutal. They cut paintings from their frames, leaving behind empty spaces that still hang in the museum today, haunting reminders of what was lost. They also took a Chinese bronze beaker and a bronze eagle finial, suggesting their motives weren't purely artistic appreciation, but financial. Despite their thoroughness, the thieves made some puzzling decisions. They left behind other valuable pieces, including works by Michelangelo and Botticelli. This has led to endless speculation. Were they amateurs who didn't recognize the art's true value, or were they working on a specific request from a collector? The heist was meticulously planned, but the aftermath was anything but. In 2009, a promising tip finally gave the FBI a legitimate suspect, a gangster by the name of Robert Gentile, a.k.a. the Cook. The feds asked Gentile to take a polygraph, which he failed. This would grant them a warrant to search his house. Unfortunately, none of the pieces were there. However, police hats and badges, much like the ones used by the thieves, were found, as well as a list of stolen art from the Gardner Museum with the black market prices. However, this was not enough to warrant an indictment. Gentile, the lone suspect in the greatest art heist in history, died from a stroke on September 17, 2021, possibly taking the fate of the artwork to the grave with him. Over 30 years later, the case remains unsolved. Today, the empty frames still hang in the Gardner Museum, a silent plea for their return. The museum has offered a $10 million reward for information leading to the recovery of the stolen pieces. It was Christmas Eve, 1945, in Fayetteville, West Virginia. The Sodder family, George and Jenny, along with 9 of their 10 children, were celebrating the holiday in their 2-story home. The evening was filled with joy as the children opened a few small gifts and played together before bedtime. Little did they know this Christmas would end in tragedy and become one of the most puzzling mysteries in American history. At around 1 a.m., Jenny Sodder, who had gone to bed earlier, was awakened by a strange sound. A loud thud on the roof followed by a rolling noise. She didn't think much of it and drifted back to sleep. Shortly thereafter, she woke again to the smell of smoke. Rushing out of her bedroom, she discovered that the house was on fire, with flames rapidly engulfing the living room. George and Jenny managed to escape with 4 of their children. Sylvia, just 2 years old, and 3 older siblings. Marion, George Jr., and John. But 5 of their children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny and Betty, were still inside. George tried desperately to save them. He broke a window to re-enter the house, cutting himself badly in the process. The staircase was already consumed by flames, making it impossible to reach the upper floor where the children slept. Thinking quickly, he ran to retrieve a ladder that was always kept near the house, but it was mysteriously missing. He then attempted to start his truck to drive it close to the house and climb on top, but inexplicably, the truck wouldn't start, even though it had been functioning perfectly the day before. Meanwhile, Jenny attempted to call the fire department, but the phone line was dead. A neighbour ran to a local tavern to alert authorities, but help didn't arrive until hours later, long after the house had burned to the ground. When the fire was finally extinguished, the Sodders searched through the rubble for any sign of their 5 missing children. To their shock, no remains were found. Experts later explained that even in a fire of that magnitude, human bones would not have been completely incinerated. This only deepened the mystery. Had the children been consumed by the fire, or had something far more sinister happened? A discarded object resembling a pineapple bomb was found near the site, suggesting the fire might have been deliberately set. Additionally, neighbours reported seeing a man stealing a block and tackle from the Sodder property around the time of the fire. The Sodders began to suspect foul play. George, an Italian immigrant and outspoken critic of Italy's Prime Minister, Benito Mussolini, had clashed with local figures sympathetic to the dictator. Months before the fire, a strange man had visited the home, warning George that his house would go up in smoke because of his political views. Another visitor had attempted to sell the Sodders life insurance and became angry when George refused, ominously stating, "Your house is going to burn, and your children are going to be destroyed." Theories about the children's fate began to swirl. Witnesses reported seeing them in the days and weeks after the fire. A woman claimed to have seen the children in a car driving away from the scene that night. Another witness said she saw them at a hotel in Charleston, West Virginia, accompanied by mysterious adults. Determined to uncover the truth, George and Jenny hired private investigators and even consulted a pathologist to examine the site. The pathologist found no bones in the rubble, but did discover small, unburned pieces of household items, further fueling doubts that the fire had been hot enough to destroy human remains. The Sodders' most chilling discovery came in the 1960s, when Jenny received a photograph in the mail. It was of a young man resembling her missing son, Louis, now an adult. Written on the back were cryptic words: "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, Lil boys, A90132 or 35. The photo reignited the family's search, and they hired a private investigator to travel to Central City to look into the letter, but the PI vanished like a ghost and never heard from again. Throughout their lives, the Sodders refused to let the case fade into obscurity. They placed a large billboard near their home featuring photos of the missing children and offering a reward for information. The sign remained a fixture on the side of the highway for decades, a haunting reminder of the unsolved mystery. As the years passed, the Sodder Children's disappearance became one of America's most enduring mysteries. Were they victims of a tragic fire, or were they kidnapped as part of a sinister plot? The case remains unsolved, leaving generations to wonder what really happened on that fateful Christmas Eve in 1945. The Shark Arm murders stand out as one of Australia's most perplexing and bizarre criminal cases, combining elements of underworld crime, a severed limb, and a man-eating tiger shark. The case captivated 1930s Australia and continues to baffle true crime enthusiasts to this day. On April 17, 1935, a fisherman named Bert Hobson caught a large 14-foot tiger shark off the coast of Coogee in Sydney, Australia. Hobson decided to donate the shark to the Coogee Aquarium Baths, where it became a local attraction. Curious spectators flocked to see the live shark, which was housed in a tank for public display. A few days later, on April 25th, the shark's behaviour became erratic. It swam sluggishly, and to the horror of onlookers, it began convulsing violently. Suddenly, it vomited its stomach contents into the tank. Among the debris, fish, a bird, and seaweed, was something far more disturbing: a human arm. The arm was remarkably well preserved, showing no signs of digestion. It bore a distinctive tattoo of 2 sparring boxes, which would prove to be a key detail in identifying the victim. The severed arm was quickly handed over to the police and an investigation began. Authorities determined that the arm had been severed not by the shark's teeth, but with a sharp instrument indicating foul play. The arm wasn't torn off during an attack, it had been deliberately removed from a human body. Investigators turned to the tattoo for identification. The tattoo led police to James Smith, a 45-year-old former boxer and small-time criminal known to frequent Sydney's underworld. Smith's family confirmed his identity based on the tattoo and the arm's physical characteristics. With this identification, the focus shifted to uncovering how his arm had ended up in the shark's stomach. James Smith was far from an innocent victim. He had a history of petty crime and had recently become embroiled in Sydney's organised criminal scene. His associates included 2 key figures: Patrick Brady, a known forger, and Reginald Holmes, a wealthy businessman with a double life as a smuggler and fraudster. Smith had reportedly been blackmailing both Brady and Holmes, threatening to expose their illegal operations unless they paid him off. This blackmail plot provided a motive for murder. Investigators pieced together Smith's final movements and learned that he was last seen alive on April 7, 1935, in the company of Patrick Brady. Brady had rented a small cottage in Cronulla, a coastal suburb of Sydney, around the time of Smith's disappearance. Witnesses reported that Smith visited the cottage to meet with Brady. It was here that police believe Smith was murdered. The working theory was that Brady killed Smith during the meeting and then dismembered his body to dispose of the evidence. The arm, along with other body parts, was dumped into the ocean, but fate intervened when a tiger shark swallowed it. This unexpected turn of events brought the crime to light in the most bizarre manner imaginable. Reginald Holmes, a respected but shady businessman, became a key figure in the case. Holmes operated a successful boat-building business by day but was heavily involved in illegal activities, including insurance fraud and smuggling. He had worked with both Brady and Smith in various schemes, and likely feared exposure. When police questioned Holmes, he initially denied any involvement. However, as pressure mounted, he agreed to testify against Brady, offering to provide details about the murder in exchange for leniency. But this decision would lead to another dramatic twist in the story. On June 11, 1935, just days before he was set to testify, Reginald Holmes was found dead in his car near Sydney Harbour. and the scene looked as if it was staged, putting suspicion on Holmes's death. Many believed it was a calculated murder designed to silence him before he could testify. Holmes's death threw the case into disarray. Without his testimony, the prosecution lost a critical piece of evidence tying Patrick Brady to James Smith's murder. Almost a century later, and Jimmy Smith's murder remains unsolved. Although Patrick Brady appears to be the most likely suspect, the evidence was not sufficient enough to merit a conviction. With all the key players now deceased, it is almost certain that we will never know the whole truth.